When she was in middle school, Konoha Sato wrote a story and gave the lovely heroine her name. It was a love magic fantasy adventure. Her mother barged in the room, scolding her because she wasn't studying. And Konoha didn't care. She spent her days writing her story non-stop, believing that one day she'd be summoned to another world. She didn't know when that would happen. So she decided to leave a letter in this one while she could. Writing this story was practice for when she went to another world. 10 years later, she'd get a phone call from her mother on her way back from work, asking about that very letter she wrote. Since Konoha didn't live at her parents' home anymore, her mother was looking to clean everything out of her room. And Konoha didn't mind. She had already taken everything she needed. But while remembering what that note was, Truck-kun claimed another victim. Recalling the story set in the magical kingdom, lived a heroine, a count's daughter named Konoha. Basically a self-insert. When her younger sister's potential fiancé, a young man named Genoford, visits, she meets him by chance in the garden. And for the both of them, it's love at first sight. But standing in the path of the two heroes was Konoha's younger sister, Iana. Iana was known for being a villainess to her core. Her jealousy, especially towards her sister, often got her in trouble. She found fault with everyone and had a terrible reputation. Iana will cause trouble. That was the reason Konoha and Genoford weren't allowed to meet openly, and also the reason they couldn't announce their betrothal. Even so, Konoha loved her younger sister. But Iana, being so spiteful, harassed Konoha in every way she could think of. Eventually, even her life became a target. One day, Iana received a book called The Dark History that caused whomever read it to collapse, and she cackled, knowing she would finally kill her big sister. However, the book would accidentally open onto her eyes, and as she squealed in anguish, thoughts and memories poured into her mind of the real-world Konoha's letters and memories. The letter read, "Dear Father, Mother, I am no longer in this world. This is because I have a destiny to fulfill." The conclusion of the letter was her realizing she awakened as a saint. That would be the beginning of her tragic fate. Then, coming to, she'd be confronted by the knights. She remembered this scene. Iana would be under arrest for attempted murder of Konoha Magnolia. But Iana was the name of the villainess of the story she made up. Since she was Konoha Sato, she wondered why they were calling her Iana, the antagonist's name. She remembered being on the phone with her mother on the way home from work. Getting thrown in the slammer, she finally realized she's been reincarnated. This world was a product of her imagination that she created throughout middle and high school. In the prologue of The Dark History, Konoha, the heroine who had the same name as her, saved the world with many handsome men protecting her all the while. And now the person she reincarnated into was the heroine's enemy, the evil younger sister, Iana. Konoha rushed into the cell to embrace her. She was so worried having heard the police arrested her sister and held out her hand to bring her home. Real Konoha couldn't believe the Konoha she wrote was in front of her. She smelled nice and her voice was so pretty. She gushed over fictional Konoha's angelicness. Rushing over and pulling out his sword was Genoford Dandelion. Iana was shocked seeing the main hero was here. Gino told Konoha to stand back, asking why Iana hadn't been killed yet. But of course, with the way Konoha was written, she'd always defend her beloved little sister. Still, he'd point his blade at her, reminding Konoha of the night Iana snuck an assassin into her carriage at the ball, paid a servant to poison the drinks, spread baseless rumors throughout the manor that caused trouble, and tried to destroy her mind using the Dark History. Also, she switched out Konoha's horse for a cow. Dang, real Konoha was kinda feeling proud for writing all that, but now wondered what she did in her past life to deserve this villainous reincarnation. After being forced to watch the lovey-dovey protagonists, she was sent to an area on the border that the Count's family owned, where she was to stay under confinement for 3 months. She was thankful that fictional Konoha was so merciful towards her. This was a good opportunity for her to get used to this world. However, she then remembered Iana was supposed to be killed in confinement by a man hired by the Count's family. Uh-oh, she was destined for death. When that man was a child, he was sold as a slave, and Konoha saved him. He's been in love with Konoha ever since, and hoped that he could protect her. Being escorted around the manor, she'd quickly find all the servants were scared of her until she was introduced to the dazzling 17-year-old Sol Nemophila, her personal attendant, and the man who would kill her. She wondered if anyone was stupid enough to live with someone they knew would kill them. But of course there wasn't. As he approached, she stepped back. She cried internally, not wanting to die. He was both aloof and cordial, offering to get her a warm drink. And with him gone, she plopped onto the table to breathe a sigh of relief, but then remembered she wasn't safe. If she wanted to survive, she had to remember all the world building for the story. This world didn't just have humans, but also angels, demons, ninjas, and samurai. That aside, she needed to figure out something or she'd be killed. And while contemplating what to do, Soul returned with a knife behind his back. She cut off his attack to tell him she wanted to write her sister a letter. She was so scared because his footsteps didn't make a sound. She giggled and made pleasantries as he served her tea, thinking about how she had to make choices carefully to avoid death. From now on, she'd live as Iana, the normal daughter of a count, and marry some bland nobleman, and live peacefully. But first, she needed to avoid Soul killing her. The first thing she needed to do was show that she approved of Jinaford and Konoha's marriage, then apologize for all her offensiveness and distance herself from the dark history. While she wrote vigorously, Soul contemplated what she was thinking. Later, at Count Magnolia's residence, Gino looked at the letter that read, "I offer my congratulations on your future wedding." He knew this would certainly make Konoha happy, but he tore it up and threw it in the fire, thinking the contents were insincere. He couldn't believe Iana would have a change of heart now. Soul would point out his interactions with her as odd. She reacted to the slightest hint of bloodlust, and she had remarkable instinct. He believed they couldn't let their guard down, and surmised that was why Gino ordered her assassination under confinement. Soul came back to Iana, explaining Konoha was away on a trip with their uncle, as the excuse for why he didn't obtain a reply to her letter. Iana was wary, of course, because she didn't remember writing anything about an uncle. But then, it started to come back to her. When Konoha rescued Soul from the slave market, their uncle was there with her. She remembered the kind words Konoha told Soul the day she saved him, and recited them herself. "You're not a slave anymore. Soul, your beautiful hands aren't meant for dirty work." He was stunned. He questioned how she knew those words. But she didn't mean to blurt them out loud, and decided to flee back to her room, trying to remember more of the story. It came to her that their uncle was plotting to capture Konoha. Their uncle suffered unrequited love for their mother in their youth, and all he could do was bottle his feelings up. But when Konoha grew up, she looked exactly like her, and his twisted passion overflowed once again. He would lure Konoha to an abandoned village, wound Jinoford, and attempt to force himself onto her. But the shock would release the magic hidden away within her, and their uncle would be defeated. Then, to find a way to reawaken Jinoford, she gets caught up in trouble all over the world. Iana began to worry about her sister and Gino, but then remembered her own life was on the line. She needed to worry about herself first. But then, thinking about how much Konoha was worried about her, she felt she needed to do something. She stormed out of her room, trying to tell someone to get a horse to the capital, but was distraught with the fact that no one would even look at her. And then Soul approached. He told her the other servants had all their own work to do, and asked that she stop behaving like she did in the capital. She tried to object at first, but then walked away, remembering he was right, and that this was the world she created in her own dark history. In the real world, this was all a fantasy. She never considered that it was actually real for the characters. She was now bearing the responsibility for all her fantasies. She freaked out while riding on a horse. Even knowing in Iana's backstory, she should be proficient, but in her past life, she was terrified. Arriving at the church, Konoha was charmed by the historic site. Her uncle explained it had been a long time since his village was abandoned, and told Gino to leave his sword behind, since this place was sacred. Iana believed she'd make it in time. She thought about how she always wanted to be like Konoha, beautiful and pure, a girl loved by so many, with special powers and circumstances, being unrealistically dramatic. Seeing such a heroine in distress fired her up. But here, everything was real. She didn't want the wounds in the story to become wounds in reality. The uncle lunged his blade towards Gino, telling him to die. And Iana burst in at the nick of time and whacked him away with a sack of rocks she picked up earlier. She was glad she made it. Gino would be a little caught off guard, hearing Iana telling him to look after Konoha. Soon after, the uncle tried to attack her instead, but Soul would come to the rescue. He'd say, "Should the daughter of a noble be confronting a ruffian? It's quite unseemly, Lady Iana." He was so dashing in her eyes. She pulled away, and we learned he'd been following her since she left the manor. She felt guilt knowing the characters committed crimes that she had written in this story. Perhaps a bit self-indulgent, but she wanted to feel the weight of this responsibility. Gina would approach her later, asking if she knew about her uncle's fixation with Konoha, and if that was why she was protecting her in secret. He believed she didn't want him to become Konoha's fiancé to agitate her uncle's feelings, and figured that was why she opposed their marriage. Real Konoha knew that wasn't it, and that his naive interpretation was so far off, but maybe that meant she successfully changed the dark history. She felt relief, knowing she no longer had to die. Sol then came by to thank her as well, coldly saying he wouldn't have been able to resist killing anyone who harmed Konoha. This event was bad in a new way. In the story, this incident caused Konoha's magic to awaken, and that allowed her to escape the disaster that had befall her later. But since Iana saved her, that hasn't happened. So, if something happened to Konoha and Sol suspected her, he'd definitely kill her. She had to protect Konoha from now on. 1 month after becoming Iana, she was still having a rough time adjusting. She gushed over the beautiful view of Barbara Forest, but suddenly felt like she'd forgotten something really important. Arriving at the location, Konoha brightly greeted her. They were going to see the flowers today. Gino gently grabbed Iana, trying to lead her to where they were going, and she'd stumble on a rock so he romantically held her? This was her ideal high-spec man. Sol entered scene, telling her not to cause trouble for Jennifer, and that he'd show her the way from here, offering his own hand. His icy gaze was so cold. If Jennifer was the Flame Knight, then Sol was an Ice Butler. Sol was a lonely assassin and beautiful as a doll. For Konoha's sake, he's taken on the appearance of a butler to keep an eye on her. As he told Iana there was no need for thanks because this was simply his duty, she thought of him as her ideal form, the man she poured all her aesthetic sense into. He's super scary to her, but she somehow found that appealing. Dang, I think a lot of my viewers would like him. That aside, she made up her mind. She'd protect Konoha so that nothing bad happens to her, and she'll survive too. Back in middle school, the real Konoha absolutely believed she would be summoned to another world. One day, her mother asked if she had a crush on anyone, and she did. Living somewhere far away was her fiancé, Jennifer. Her mother shuddered, thinking it might be an international marriage. But no, it was obviously a marriage in another world. Never getting summoned, she forgot her dark history, and through reincarnation, she of course became Iana. Too excited about her outing with Konoha, Iana accidentally knocked over her sister, and numerous guards showed up from the bushes to protect her. The love of the people of this world had for her was so strong. Iana was terrified of what would happen if they ever became suspicious. Worse, she feared what Sol would do if he suspected her. Konoha would decide to conclude their outing with a tea party as a way to thank Iana for rescuing them the other day. Iana was charmed by the sparkle and glitter of the angelic heroine and main hero. Sol then served them the tea, which was made with the highest quality leaves grown in their lands. It smelled so nice. In her previous life, the real Konoha wasn't even making her own tea, being too exhausted after work. She had to buy pre-made ones. And now, it felt like her anxiety was melting away. When a bunny appeared from the bushes, the sisters were gushing at how cute it was. Konoha was truly happy getting to spend time with her sister like this. And Iana was stunned by how adorable her sister was. Konoha then walked over to some blooming violets, and Sol quickly warned her to get away from there. Suddenly, a monster leaped out and carried her away. Trying to remember which part of the plot this was, Iana then recalled it was chapter 2. In the main story, the incident with her uncle awakened Konoha's magical powers. But Jennifer remained unconscious. To heal him, she headed to Barbara Forest in search of herbs needed for his medicine. After obtaining the herbs, Konoha and her companions ran into a monster on their way back home. In middle school, the real Konoha began learning about various things, and she battled a variety of fantasies while writing chapter 2. She found it hard telling others these things, and if they were to be given a color, they'd be a blushing pink. When a beautiful female lead was left flustered and blushing, hearing words like brute, beast, and sadist, this was a period in which her mental censor was easily triggered. She became curious, and although she didn't want to admit it, her conflicting feelings gave rise to this highly erotic monster. Seriously, what kind of story was this girl even trying to write? When Sol appeared behind her and asked what was wrong, Iana was jittering as she mentioned she was trying to remember some things about the monster. Jennifer then asked for help. This part of her dark history was extremely embarrassing, but if Konoha gets hurt, Sol would kill her. Not wanting to die, Iana agreed to tell what she knew about the monster. They were around a campfire as Iana explained that the monster would observe its target first after capturing it. Since it was less active at night, this was the best time to save Konoha, because once morning came, she would be ravished in all the perverted ways book talk rates interspecies fantasy novels. But Iana couldn't say that. Instead, she told them Konoha would be devoured. Confronting Iana, Sol remembered saying it was her first time in Barbara Forest, and he questioned where the daughter of a count could possibly obtain information about monsters. Panicking, she told him she had done some research before coming to the forest, and if people around her sister were knowledgeable, it would protect her. But Sol asked why she didn't inform Konoha when they arrived. At this point, Iana realized her crisis management ability wasn't the best. Sol was obviously suspicious of her. Jennifer then came to the rescue, asking her to guide them to the monster's lair, and she thought once Konoha was safe, it would help convince Sol of her innocence. When they got close, Jennifer asked her to wait behind with Sol because he didn't want to put her in danger. He promised to save Konoha, even if it cost him his life. Iana didn't mind waiting, if it would clear her of suspicion. The soldiers would rush past her to attack the monsters that suddenly appeared. That's when she remembered that the carnal beast wasn't the only monster in the Barbara Forest. Hearing Konoha scream, Iana rushed off to save her sister. Because she prevented the incident with her uncle, Konoha of course didn't have the magic to protect herself. Before the monster could devour Konoha, Iana plucked a plant and threw it at the beast. Running to her sister, Iana thought about how she didn't want to die and wanted to stop playing the unfortunate role of villainess. She just wanted to live a peaceful life. Iana would use her body to shield her sister. Wait, what was she doing? She worked so hard to avoid dying, only to choose the death route herself. Before the beast's claws could shred her, that's when Jennifer and Sol would attack the beast. It slapped Iana with its tail as it turned to get away. Jennifer ordered his men not to chase it too far. He covered Konoha with his coat, apologizing for letting such terror befall her. But Konoha believed he would come to save her. Just thinking about him made her fears disappear. While Iana was excited that Konoha and Jennifer were alright, Sol would carry her in his arms. She became flustered, saying she was fine and just needed a little rest. As the sun rose, Sol told her of the man-eating flowers that were active in the morning, and that if she wanted to be attacked, she just needed to let him know. He was basically encouraging her to give herself up. As the tea party came to an end, Iana was convinced that even if the story changed for Konoha, the events she wrote in The Dark History were absolute. But since she was still here, even though she was meant to have died, she had no idea what would happen in the future. At Count Magnolia's residence, Jennifer rescinded the order to assassinate Iana. He felt he had misjudged her and asked Sol if he thought differently. But Sol couldn't give a clear answer, replying only that if Jennifer gave him an order, he would follow it. 2 months later, Iana received a letter from her mother. Sol suspected it was permission to return to the capital, since her 3 months of confinement were nearly over. However, it was actually an invitation to a ball, which marked the start of Chapter 3. Iana and Konoha appeared ever so beautifully at the venue, and she was gushing at how adorable her sister looked. Suddenly, she asked Konoha not to dance with anyone, but Konoha had been looking forward to it, and Iana couldn't give a clear reason as to why she shouldn't. All she knew was that something bad would happen if Konoha danced. 8th grader syndrome flashback incoming. In middle school, the real Konoha wasn't invited to the summer festival by anyone, causing her to spend the whole summer in her room. She didn't need any fun memories in this life, and fantasized about her overwhelming beauty at the ball that would cause the king to declare her a saint. Then, she would set out with companions to defeat the Demon King. It was her destiny! So, if Konoha danced with men at this ball, she would go on a journey. But if she went on this journey without her magical powers, she wouldn't be able to protect herself. And of course, if Konoha gets hurt, Sol would kill her. She had to stop Konoha from dancing with the princes no matter what. She spotted someone talking to Jennifer and Konoha and felt she had seen him before. Iana freaked out, realizing it was the citizen from the notebooks in her past life, a handsome, fresh-faced knight captain. As he asked Konoha to dance, Iana immediately stepped in and whisked him off to the dance floor in a comical spinning fashion. She then spotted the second person trying to dance with Konoha. He was the third prince of a neighboring country, the Lily Kingdom. and a playboy. Without a moment's delay, she scooped him away too. The last character she had created for this story was the Prince of this land. In this world, the heroine was special. There were so many roles only Konoha could fulfill. Seeing the Rose Kingdom's tiny prince ask Konoha to dance, Yana would spill wine all over the floor, making a scene. With this, she had blocked all three of them, evading the death flag this time. Running off to get something to eat, she didn't expect Sol to ask her to dance. He looked so handsome to her, but she was confused, fearing he had seen her getting in everyone's way. As they graced the dance floor, she wondered why she was dancing with the man who was trying to kill her. She accidentally stepped on his foot. Then he began to guide her slowly. Their dance sparkled, and she got a warm feeling, like she was in a field of roses. She could hardly relax. Sol then asked who she really was. Given how she had done everything to get in Konoha's way earlier, he wanted to know if she was trying to make her sister miserable, or if her actions were for the sake of Konoha's smile. He couldn't understand who she was. But Yana just stared into his eyes, speechless. As the ball came to an end, she realized her change in attitude led to Sol's confusion. Jennifer came to her, asking if something was wrong, but she ran off, saying she was going to rest. Arriving in the guest room, she flopped onto the couch. Unbeknownst to her, the building was now on fire, and a sudden explosion occurred. Outside, Jennifer and Sol split up to search for Konoha, but she called out to them and mentioned her sprained ankle, apologizing for not talking about it earlier. Konoha assumed Yana had noticed it, which was why she didn't want her dancing. Meanwhile, Yana was trapped in the burning building. She had no idea about this scene and wondered if the story triggered a death flag for her because Sol hadn't killed her. With no other option, she charged through the flames, hoping Konoha and the others managed to escape safely. She believed everything was alright. After all, she had survived everything so far. The story she wrote was a tale where the main character overcomes difficulties and finds happiness. Now that she'd reincarnated and could spend time with Konoha, she wanted to make her sister even happier. Seeing Konoha smile in those moments made the real Konoha happy that she'd become Iana. Sadly, the ceiling crumbled and her leg got stuck in the rubble. Was this the end for her? She rewrote Chapter 3 to prevent Konoha from going on a journey to save the world. So, she believed everything was alright, and her role was done. That's when Sol came running to save her. In this moment, he told her he would be upset if she died without him knowing who she truly was. Carrying her, he broke through the window and landed in a pool. Konoha then ran to her sister, giving her a warm hug. She didn't want to know what would have happened if Sol hadn't come to her rescue. Iana would then thank Sol for saving her. He still didn't understand her, but would continue to stay by her side to see who she truly was. It wasn't about to get any less dangerous for her. But she couldn't tell if her heart was racing because of danger or because of Sol. However, she'd see for herself what lay beyond the dark history. Alright, another fun ending to this episode. I think in contrast to the other two villainous anime I'm covering this season, which have longer overarching narratives, I think this one may be more aimlessly episodic. You know, she mentions the beast attacking happens in chapter 2 of the story she wrote, but what do you guys think? Subscribe for next week's part, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea, and I'll see you all in the next one.